Okay, this is going to be a quick demo and Q&A if you guys have any questions about running FastHTML inside Jupyter. Um, so there is okay, so
We can see your screen.
you say you can't see my screen?
No, we can.
You can, great. Um, okay, so there's using Jupyter to write FastHTML documentation page, which all of our docs are also notebooks. So if you go to the FastHTML repo, you'll find it in NB's tutorials, Jupyter and FastHTML. So what this lets you do is to basically run a web server, a FastHTML web server inside a notebook and test your application in it. And there's some really convenient features that provides. Basically lets you do everything dynamically. You never have to restart the server to try out new stuff, thanks to the dynamic features of Python. So it requires bringing in one extra thing, which is fasthtml.jupyter. So normally we use FastApp to create our application object in our router. If you just change that to JupyApp, it's almost the same as FastApp, but it's just some minor changes to make it work better in a notebook. So, so that's the first thing we do differently to test in a notebook. Our routes are defined exactly the same way as usual. So here's a route with a title and a paragraph. Okay, and the second change is we don't run serve. Instead, we run JupyUV, Jupyter Uvicorn, and we pass in our app. That's going to return a server object. The reason that's useful is we can use it to stop the server if we want to. Okay, so that's now running a server. By default, it's running on port 8000, as you see here. So at this point, we could go to localhost :8000 and see it. So it's running, and you can just go to it another tab. But it's a little bit more convenient often to see it running in the same notebook. So we can put it into an iframe. And the convenient way to put it into an iframe is to run the HTMX function. And there it is. Okay. And you can run server.stop to stop it. Okay, and now the server's not running. So if I go back to here, you can see now it's not running. To run it again, you just rerun JupyUV. This is the thing that runs the server. Okay, what if we change the index page, the home page, to add, say, the word demo? Okay, then I don't have to rerun the server, but the iframe hasn't refreshed. So to force the iframe to refresh, just run the HTMX cell again. Right? So notice we didn't have to reload anything in terms of the server or anything because it's all dynamic, it's Python. We just had to refresh the iframe. So to put it back, we run that cell and we run that cell. Does that make sense so far?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
You
So
also
then
mentioned using
what if we want to add a button? HX get equals click, say, and then we'll define, oopsie daisy, and then we'll define a route called click, and that's going to return, oops. Okay. So then we're going to need to, I mean, we don't have to put a destination, but we could do that as well. HX target equals, I don't know, whatever, some destination div. And so then let's create a div to pop that into. Div. Okay. So, okay, so since I changed the index page, again, I don't need to rerun the server, but I do need to rerun HTMX. Okay, if I click, you clicked me. Cool. And then if I want to change click now, I don't need to rerun anything, including the HTMX cell, because I don't need to refresh this. I just changed the handler. So I don't need to rerun anything. I just run that cell and then hit click. You see it's already worked, right? Because it's all running dynamically right here, right? So as soon as I run this cell, this is redefined click. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's pretty
It's
cool.
pretty cool, right? Like it's we didn't have to do anything really in FastHTML to make it work. It's just how Python works, you know.
If I
Um,
wanted to go to a specific route with HTMX, um, that function, how would I do that? So like if I just wanted to go to the click um, route.
so we haven't currently added a path here. We should probably do that.
Okay.
Yeah. So for now, um, your options are either, and you could kind of have side by side tabs if you wanted to, or you could just, um, create a little index page that has a few links linking to each of the things you care about, or something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
I think what
Awesome.
I'll do in the next few days, or maybe one of you guys can do, is just add a path here,
Yeah.
because like HTMX, the function HTMX, um, literally is just iframe source equals. So we just have to add hash
Yeah.
path here. If you're wondering why there's all this JavaScript, that's because it does this rather neat thing that you might have seen it actually happening. Um, when I first created this, you can see the height of it does not have room for the destination div. And as soon as I click
Hmm.
click, it increases the size of the cell. Oh. So that's what the JavaScript does, is it dynamically resizes the Jupyter output to be big enough to show the iframe. So
That's really
Oh,
nice.
that's cool.
yeah. Um, so then if you want to, um, add styles or whatever, you totally can, right? So for example, Pico by default is false here, but we can put it to true. Actually, if I'm going to do that, we should now close the server because we're actually going to change the definition. Okay, so let's add Pico and run this again. And so you can see this is
Wow.
styled. And because
Nice.
it's running in an iframe, it's totally independent.
Pixel perfect kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like as you build things up, you um you don't have like you can kind of see things as you go. Um so there's a if you run this Pico conditional link, and so show is a thing that causes the HTML to be rendered and added to your DOM, then this is something that now lets you like kind of do stuff like show titled or show, let's say, I don't know, whatever container. H1, I, P there. Oops, P. Um,
So is show doing the same thing then, I guess, as a percent HTML cell basically?
Um, yeah, pretty much. And then if you look at fast HTML, um, Pico, this is actually a pretty good demo. So this is the like Pico example. Do you see here how all the groups and
Yeah.
buttons and everything and cards are displayed directly here? These are not running in iframes or anything, but this is because we use this. Yes, and then you also have to call set Pico class. So that's why that's not running yet. So set Pico class. There we go. So now it's working.
Uh,
And so the reason, if you care that we need a bit of special behavior, is that I wanted I wanted us to be able to use style sheet libraries like Pico CSS without it messing up the Jupyter styles. This is a really common problem, including, for example, in documentation. So if you look at the documentation for that Pico page, for example, you'll see that it looks fine in Quarto, right? And yet also the Pico styles work correctly. And so the trick to making this work is that some frameworks like Pico have what's called a class conditional um, style sheet that you can use. And the class conditional style sheet basically says only use these styles inside a DOM element with some particular style. So if you look at this DOM element
okay.
here, um, you'll see it's got the
That
Pico
one has Pico.
added here as
Yeah.
a class. And then in a notebook, we're like dynamically adding things, and we want the things we dynamically add to always have that Pico added to them. So that this runs a little JavaScript observer that adds Pico to any output that we create. So that's how come that works.
Okay.
So yeah, you don't have to use iframes. Iframes are going to give you perfect rendering. Uh, they're going to give you HTMX interactions, so that that's second best only to opening a new tab and typing localhost colon 8000. Um, but yeah, you can still go quite a long way. And then, in terms of then turning this into a application, you've got a few options. And again, this is stuff that we can make a lot smoother still. I suspect we can rewrite FastApp so we don't need GPApp. Instead, it could check if it's running in a notebook and do that stuff automatically. We probably don't really need GPUV. Maybe we can do again rake serve, be able to check what it's running in, do things automatically. But for now, what you'd have to do if you want to export this would be this cell you wouldn't export, but instead you'd say if in notebook do that, else, you know, um, you could do something like this, you know, um, or this cell you could just like not export, you know, and then this cell you could export, stuff like that. So at the moment, you can do that in slightly hacky ways. Um, or you can just export the handlers and then have a separate file that just imports the handlers and has FastApp and serve in it and nothing else. I think that's all I have to say for myself, but yeah, anything else? I know, Isaac, you've been doing quite a bit of stuff. Anything else you feel it'll be useful for people to know about if they're interested in doing Jupyter-based fast HTML development?
Yeah, I've used the show quite a bit. I'm interested in looking at the class conditionals that you did because I think there's certain things that get a little odd with the show method, and I'm wondering if I can get that working with other frameworks.
And oh, I
But
didn't
yeah,
answer your question. Yeah, and all show does, yeah, is it calls display.html to underscore XML thing. And display.html is what percent HTML does behind the scenes.
cool. Yeah, so I think the big thing is just looking at stuff like a lot. Like I think it's like if you add a line or two, then you can show and make sure it's roughly the right proportions and then kind of keep going. And then you can combine it later. I think it's like if you end up with writing an entire form and then try and show it, then something's off and that can be really frustrating. But if you
Yeah.
kind of build it as you go, because you're in a notebook anyway, then it seems to work pretty well
Yeah,
for
kind of
a lot.
component by component, build them up.
Yeah.
And Isaac's been doing a lot of work with literally porting a large UI framework to FastHTML. So you have a lot of real world experience of this issue. You have the scars to show for it, right?
Yeah, there's some I think there's some like web component type stuff that doesn't quite work right with show, but I want to try that out with the HTMX Jupy app rendering and see if that
When you say
see
web
if
components, you mean actual web components like the JavaScript web components?
I believe so. Yeah, there's like a UK select one in Frankie I. There's not a ton of web components there, but there's a few web components there, and
Yeah. Web
they don't work
components are
right.
tough in Jupyter because, like web components, as in the JavaScript thing, because the JavaScript API, the spec, has no way to redefine web components. Once they're defined, they're there for good. So you can use them within Jupyter, but like once they're there, you can't like change them or anything. Um, yeah, it's one of the limitations of web components that I guess they've tried to make them like really locked down and also really isolated, which has their benefits, but it also means they're a bit harder to hack on in this kind of way. Okay, thanks to you both. I hope people
All
find
right,
this useful.
thanks.
See you.